Good morning, this is Anna Amelia from North East Animal Rights. I'm doing another one of our Saturday Spotlight interviews. Today we have Lara, who is the director of the Jewish Vegetarian Society. So hello, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. So if it's okay with you, we'll just go straight into the questions. Sort of don't worry if you don't answer the questions directly. It's just conversation, okay? I just want people to find out about the Jewish Vegetarian Society and your work, okay? So first one is, how long have you been a vegan and what was the process you went through? Do you find it harder to discuss your veganism or your faith with your friends and your colleagues, and how do you deal with it?
Well, thank you, firstly, for having us. I have been vegan 7 and a bit years. It coincides exactly to the day with me starting my job at the Jewish Vegetarian Society, coincidentally. And I was actually raised not eating meat. So I come from a household where vegetarian food was the norm. And I've never been a meat eater. I ate fish up until I was at university, and that was where I really started to make the connection. So it's been a gradual journey for me as I've omitted things from my diet over time.
Yeah.
I've got very, very fond memories growing up eating really, really wonderful vegetarian food, and I never felt a sense that I was missing out. And I was quite happy and proud to tell people that I was vegetarian. I was aware at the time that it was not the norm and that it was something unusual. And so from a young age, I've been very used to people asking me questions. And it can get a little bit tiresome at some points, but generally speaking, I am quite comfortable. Essentially, it's my job to talk to people about Jewish veganism. So I'm quite comfortable doing that. Typically, people will ask questions. I think people know me as quite an open person, and I think they know it's my job to answer questions. And I do remember in previous jobs, which weren't in the vegetarian or vegan sector, people would ask questions all the time. And it does take quite a lot of patience to sort of to work with that, because it can be quite invasive every time you open your lunchbox. Someone's peering in. But times have changed since then, awareness has grown, and I do always remember the piece of advice, the most important piece of advice I was given when I chose to become vegan, which was try to be the kind of vegan you'd like to meet. And I know before I was vegan, I wouldn't have wanted to meet someone who was grumpy or preachy or judgmental. So I try to hold that dear and hold that at the centre of what I do.
Actually, that's a very good point, because when we were talking about veganuary, we were saying to vegans, it's not just about the non-vegans trying veganuary, it's about you being a really good role model and being available and being helpful and being kind to people who are making this transition, because it's quite a big thing for them. So tell me about the animals in your life, and if you have any now, or have you had any from your childhood?
So I didn't grow up with any animals as a child. I just didn't eat them, but I didn't really have any close attachment to any, didn't spend time with any. And I think that's a challenge for many of us, that we don't have a chance to build that connection or that understanding. And I'd highly recommend the book that Ingrid Newkirk has just brought out, which is called Animal Kind, Remarkable Discoveries about Animals and Revolutionary New Ways to Show Them Compassion. I think that was something lacking in my childhood. I know that I did nag my parents for a pet quite regularly, but I think I've made up for it now. I'm actually married to a dog trainer. So animals, particularly dogs, have become a big part of our lives. And I know in the past, when we've had dogs staying with us, that it has affected me. It has calmed me. It has made me think more about animals and how they might be feeling and what they might need. So I think that if we can get to a point where more people get to spend more time with a variety of animals, that can only be a beneficial thing.
Yeah. So both my husband and I are Christian vegans, and we have this conflict of going to church. I mean, I know obviously church is difficult at the moment because of COVID, but we know that those in the community, they're mostly going to come back to a roast dinner consisting of a dead animal. And we try to be good role models, we answer questions they have with humour, and we try and give them facts. And we have in the past put leaflets and things down on the side table, and take cakes for them for vegan fairs and things. So how do you promote veganism in your faith? I mean, I know it's kind of your job. It's really your job, isn't it? It's a big part of it. But outside of your job, how do you promote it?
So definitely, I would say organisationally within the job, JVS, we see a lot of opportunities, and I think that has encouraged me on a personal level to be more positive and be bolder in seeking out opportunities, creating opportunities and harnessing opportunities. I think in our community, in the Jewish community, broadly speaking, it's very normal for people to be talking about food a lot, thinking about food. I know it's probably one of the truest stereotypes of our community that food is a big part of our culture. And there are also moments in the Jewish calendar throughout the year which present really good opportunities to talk about veganism and animal welfare. So we have coming up this Wednesday, we have the Jewish New Year for the trees, which is called Tu B'Shvat in Hebrew. We actually have 4 Jewish New Years. A lot of Jewish people actually don't know this. So we have the Jewish New Year that's in September, which is a big celebration. We have the Jewish New Year for the trees. We also have a very, very underrepresented, under-celebrated festival, which is the Jewish New Year for the tithing of the animals, which a lot of Jewish vegetarian and vegan movements are trying to kind of recreate as a kind of animal welfare day. So it's quite easy to find an in, as it were, to talk about things. And we also have very strict dietary laws about what we can and can't eat. So the process of thinking about food and food preparation, and to a lesser extent where food comes from, is quite a normal thing for us. We are commanded not to eat meat and milk together. I personally obviously don't eat either, but there is a lot of thought and debate that goes on about why we might be asked not to do that. And one of the theories is because it could be considered quite cruel to be using the milk, which is meant for nourishing the animal. And so we have these opportunities in our teachings and in the calendar to talk to people. And more now, now that we've reached a point where vegan is really something that's recognised, I'm at a point in my own life, but also at work, where I can start joining other figures, particularly quite senior rabbis, who are calling vegan the new kosher, or an elevated version of kosher. And whereas 10 or even 5 years ago, that would have been quite radical and possibly offensive to some people, the profile of Jewish veganism is such that it's not bizarre to introduce yourself as a Jewish vegan or to even start talking about it. And I don't really have to bring it up. People are generally very curious and they start asking questions. And it's really nice actually that there is that interest there. And that's always been a strategy of ours at work, which again affects me in my personal life, which is to just be really open. And to me, no question is a foolish question. You know, there are those stereotypical annoying questions that you can get asked as a vegan, but the fact that someone's asking it, I think, is a good sign.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you're right about this, the kind of like the annoying questions which you get asked over and over again. But I think it is good that you know, that people are kind of are asking, you know, I don't mind being asked the daft question, because it's just an in, isn't it? It's just a way of opening up the conversation to talk about veganism. Yeah. So each faith or religion appears to have their own controversial issue. For example, when we do saves, we get asked, you know, why don't we protest outside of halal slaughterhouses? Christianity has obviously the mass slaughter of lambs and chickens at Easter and turkeys at Christmas, you know, both significant festivals, primarily around about peace and love. So the one in Judaism, which also gets the headlines in the animal rights movement, is kapparot, which is a festival about atonement. And I know there's an alternative way of doing this by giving cash. So why do you think that people feel the need still to use animals, and how do you think they justify it when, you know, I said before that the religion at its purest is about peace and love?
I'm actually really glad that you asked about this. Amazingly, in 7 years in the role, I don't think anyone's ever asked me about this before. And in some ways, I think it needs a lot more attention, and I'll explain why. And in other ways, I think maybe it's not such a big issue. So kapparot is a ritual, a customary atonement ritual that's practiced right before Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day in our calendar. It's the Day of Atonement. And there are many ways. The idea is that you're transferring your sins onto a physical object, and a very small minority of Jews use a live chicken for this, which is really, really abhorrent and disturbing, and obviously reflects very poorly on our faith. Most people who do it use something else, an inanimate object that's not an animal, and a lot of it is down to a very deeply rooted cultural practice. The people who are using the live chickens are at the extreme end of Judaism, very, very religiously observant. deliberately insular in the way they live their lives, detached from mainstream media, don't use the internet, don't engage with people outside of society. And so for us peering in, it is very, very disturbing and peculiar that they do that. But for them, it's something that they hold very close and something that they believe in. And that presents a really big challenge for animal rights movements, whether they're Jewish or not, which is to go into a completely different culture and ask and tell them to do something different. And the problem that we have is because those people have deliberately isolated themselves, and part of it is a legacy from the Holocaust that they feel that's the only way to really protect themselves is to really sort of put up this guard. It's really difficult for us to go in and criticize what they're doing without it being perceived as being anti-Semitic, for example. So there is a real challenge there, and I think it is very difficult when, you know, I as a Jew see people doing that in the name of Judaism. It's in a way it's almost doubly heartbreaking. And so I think it is really, really difficult. I think that we are moving to a point where we can engage that specific community with the idea of perhaps even talking about just how problematic factory farming is and how many Jewish laws it violates. And it might just take that bit longer. As frustrating as it is, I want them to stop it right away. It's going to be a slow process because they're not exposed in the way that we're seeing veganuary everywhere on bus stops and TV. They're not experiencing any of this at all. They're completely detached from what's going on, and in everything that they do, they're living in a way that people lived a very, very long time ago.
But so how do they justify the cruelty part of it? I mean, surely they can say it's cruel because obviously the animals don't want to do it.
I think that they possibly can't see it's cruel. Their forefathers have done it, their rabbis doing it, and for them, a lot of everything that they do is dictated. They have a blueprint for life and they follow rules and laws and customs to the letter. And everything that they do, they take their lead from their community leader. And so really, in a way, it would be the community leaders, the gatekeepers, the rabbis who we need to engage with and convince. Because I don't think they're going through a thought process of what's this chicken feeling. I think they're just saying, we're going to do what our forefathers did.
So suppose it's going back to what you said, it's actually going through the rules they're violating, you know, they're not sticking to the factory farming part of it, and then obviously all animals will come into that.
Fortunately, there is actually a growing movement in the Orthodox, the very observant side of Judaism, which is moving more and more in the direction of veganism. And there's actually a rabbi who lives in Israel who is very, very religiously observant, and he's also vegan. And he's making great strides in actually being able to open the texts in Hebrew or in Aramaic and say, this is why this is a problem, and engage with them on that level. So I think that we are a lot further along than we were, say, 10 years ago. But I think with this particular challenge, we do have to tread very lightly. So your society is called the Vegetarian Society rather than vegan. So how recently did you start to see the progression towards veganism? And do you see a time when you can change the name to vegan? Yeah, very glad that you asked about this. So the society was set up in the 60s with a very long and not catchy name, which is the Jewish Vegetarian Natural Health and Ecological Society. So you can get a sense from there that they were very interested in quite a range of things. And the name had various incarnations over time. When I arrived in 2013, I took over from a director who now works at Meat Free Mondays. She had begun the process of veganizing the organization, and I took on the baton and was very determined to make the organization as accessible as possible. And so the food at our events, everything that we do is vegan, and the name has yet to catch up. It's something we're working on. We are quite unusual in that we have this very long history. A lot of vegan groups have been set up in the last few years, but we were set up and supported by vegetarians in the 60s, and for that reason the name is taking a bit longer to move on. But the name will be changing, and we are very much dedicated to offering support to people wherever they are on their food journey. And I think in the last few years, probably it's only in the last few years that we could consider even putting the word vegan in the title and not scaring people in the community off. So I think people are well and truly ready for that. And we're excited to be able to announce a new name soon.
It's I was talking to Reverend John Ryder. He runs the Christian Vegan and Vegetarian Society, and asked him the same question. He said it's obviously it's to make it more accessible. It's again, I think it's probably the view in recent years of vegans being extreme. I know it's not extreme, it's the opposite of extreme, but I think it's kind of to keep it as accessible as possible to everyone. But now everybody knows what vegan is, so it's not so much of an extreme thing. So how did your new vegan venue come about then, and what's your involvement in it?
So JBS is really, really lucky as a charity. The founder and members bought quite a large building in London in the 60s when property was vaguely affordable, and we still have that property to this day. When I started working there, I saw the potential, having worked for other charities that didn't have assets at all. I saw the potential, and I remember people that I knew and my parents talking about having gone to JBS in the 80s and about it being this hive of activity with classes and lectures and even restaurants there. And when I arrived, I looked at the space and I really thought that we needed to bring it back to what it was and really bring it to life again. So I set about working on a plan to fund a complete overhaul and renovation of the space. And we're really lucky now to have what we think is the first Jewish vegan centre in the world that acts as a blueprint, that acts as a model. You can run an eco-friendly vegan event and survive, and you can actually really enjoy it. And we have used the space pre-COVID for loads of our own events, and we also hire out the space. So anybody coming in to use the space has got to have a vegan event, and that's actually worked really well. We've only had one person, I think, in 3 years who's been uncomfortable with that. But plenty of people have come and held a vegan bar mitzvah or a vegan 50th birthday party or a kids party, and they've tried a lot of new foods, supported vegan caterers, and it's gone really, really well.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely brilliant. Wish I was a little bit further down. You're in London, aren't you?
We're in London. I should just mention actually that the building happens to be in Golders Green, which is
right. Yeah.
And we're on Finchley Road, which is a major road through London. So we're very, very lucky to have that building. And even actually in the last year where we haven't been able to use that, we have had a lot of interest from people who want to set up similar spaces, and we can show them how we've done it and what's worked and what hasn't.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That sounds really, really good. So what's next for you and the Jewish Vegetarian Society?
We're so good at saying that we're excited to reopen the venue once it's fully safe to do so. We are excited to launch a community cooking series online, which I think is going to start next month, where people can. I think one of the most frequent questions I get asked is, I don't know what to cook for Friday night. Friday night dinner in a Jewish household is quite a big thing. It's typically a lot of chicken, and a lot of people don't know what to cook. So we're going to be doing Thursday night cooking classes where people can make their meal for Friday night, and they can all cook along. Anyone can tune in from wherever the world for free to cook along with us. So that's really exciting. We're also very aware that in the Orthodox community, the very religiously observant, there is still a tension and a challenge in being Jewish and vegan. And a lot of that comes down to people who are observing kosher food laws, picking up a product, and it might be labelled as kosher or it might be labelled as vegan, but it isn't labelled as both. And so perhaps for ease or time, people are finding that it's just easier to just cook what they know, and they're not necessarily finding it easy to be both Jewish and vegan. So we are working on producing a list of foods which have both, and working on improving labelling so that there isn't this choice when you get to an event or a friend's house or a supermarket, that there should never be a choice between your Jewish values and your vegan values. Yeah,
that sounds an absolutely mammoth task.
It is. I think we're very fortunate in that more and more companies that are producing vegan foods are seeking other certifications, whether it be gluten-free or nut-free or halal or kosher. So the readiness to do the labelling is there. And I think that the core of why we exist is to facilitate and promote Jewish veganism. And I think one of the key things is getting that labelling there, so that just removing barriers.
Well, that's certainly going to keep you busy for quite a while, I think. So that's all my questions for now. So thank you very much for joining us today and giving up your time. And I would like to wish you and everybody at the Jewish Vegetarian Society all the best of luck as well. Excuse me. So this is Anna Amelia signing off now, talking to Lara from the Jewish Vegetarian Society, and saying goodbye and thank you very much.
Thank you.